Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 17 of The Great Jahy Will Not Be Defeated. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, I seem to recall that Jahy had stoked a sense of competition between Druj and Kyoko to see who was the better friend, and while I expected disastrous consequences, there really weren't any. And interestingly enough, the episode sort of ended with the Dark Lord attacking this little creature made of light, which, sort of indicates to me that bigger things are in the works here. That was likely the creature that instigated the destruction of the Dark World in the first place. But, setting all that aside, it seems like Druj is very concerned about what Jahy wears and is trying to take matters into her own hands. And it's interesting that this act has created, a very popular clothing line that Jahy just doesn't care about. So I guess it seems like that's sort of it, the clothing brand is doing well, it's widely popular, and Jahy is none the wiser. And, it doesn't seem like Druj is ultimately disappointed that Jahy doesn't know about it, she probably doesn't know herself, but I guess when you get down to it, I figure you can't expect much in the way of a fashion sense from someone who deliberately wears a t-shirt and Crocs. That's not to say that it's a faux pas or anything, but it's certainly the bottom of the barrel. And I guess, interestingly, this was probably inevitable at some point, that Druj is having a bit of a realization that she is a boss in and of her own right. Or however you would phrase that. And, while Jahy sort of lords over her, she has people she can lord over. And I'd imagine for someone like her, this is, if not an uncomfortable realization, probably one she's not exactly ready for. I mean, that isn't to say that she's not adapting, I guess, but, I don't know, it's just one of those things where, some people aren't ready for the responsibility of being in charge, and I guess despite being, a businesswoman with a nice suit and all that, just to show up to this pub sort of unannounced, that's something. Although it is rather unfortunate that it seems like combat is now inevitable. I feel like Kyoko wouldn't cause a problem being a waitress and all that, at least not deliberately, but something tells me that Druj and Kyoko are gonna cause problems. Maybe not for the restaurant as a whole, but certainly for Jahy. Ooh. Yeah, Kyoko's rubbing it in. That's probably not good, I feel like Druj isn't gonna leave her a tip. Okay, yeah, this is not good. I figured things would be a little more sedate, but Druj is considering instigating violence, at least until she realizes that, oh, wait a minute, this place belongs to Jahy. It doesn't, but that's what she believes, so, in retrospect, it probably is a good thing that Jahy lied about it. So oh dear. I was gonna say I can't help but imagine that just for funny reasons Kyoko is going to be Druj's waitress, but unfortunately it seems like Druj is instead getting a front row seat at seeing just how useless and unlucky Kyoko is. It's one thing to just drop a tray of food or drinks or something, but to do it all the time. And I guess this is also having the added effect of causing Druj some considerable doubt. Has Jahy gone soft? And I guess, we the audience know that she has, but man, Druj is really sugarcoating things, because, yeah, Jahy does have to scold Kyoko, but, to scold her in such a, even-handed, normal manner is, that's not in line with Druj's experiences, and it's rather telling that she's jealous more than anything. I guess Druj is just a born minion, just someone who desires servitude more than anything else, but I feel like, working at a restaurant would probably disabuse her rather quickly. It really is a sort of paranoid delusion on Druj's part that she fears she will be replaced, and I don't think Jahy's even really in a position to worry about having minions and all that. Ah, man. I don't even know what level of delusion we're on here, but I feel like being so deluded as to consider that Jahy's scolding someone else as an indirect punishment for Druj. Man, if that's what gets you through the day, then go for it, I suppose, but Druj just isn't living in reality at this point. So I'm wondering if this will serve to motivate Jahy a little bit more, Because, it's not like Jahy's lacking for morale or anything. Not that we've seen in this episode, but it is always nice to be reminded that, hey, you're still as great as you ever were, even if you are a waitress nominally. Ooh, now this is something. Because Druj is basically saying, I've assimilated into the human world, some days I forget the Dark Realm, but Jahy is essentially one big anchor back to the Dark Realm. And I suppose this hits kinda hard because Jahy herself has a tendency to sort of get lost in the human world and, if not assimilate and thrive, then certainly assimilate to a degree. And I don't know, Jahy was scolding Kyoko, which is reminiscent of how she used to act, but I feel like what she was doing was kind of reasonable as opposed to the beatings she would mete out before. I can't help but wonder if maybe they do accept credit, and Kyoko was just being a jerk. Wow. So I guess Jahy really was just none the wiser. She's just happy she managed to maintain the bluff that she owns the restaurant. I feel like, of all the lies to maintain, that one's probably pretty low level. You can kind of do without that. So I guess this is just gonna be like a low-key episode for Jahy, you know, sleeping, whiling the whole day away. Oh, no, maybe it's time to shop for a mattress or something. You know, if the futon is so worn out that you can't get a good night's sleep anymore, then, you know, that's it. You gotta see to that. I mean, this is something I'm sort of aware of, that, having a good mattress to sleep on is far more important than many people realize. You know, you do spend a lot of time sleeping, and just for a whole host of reasons, it really behooves you to, you know, try and get the best sleep you possibly can. Now, the question is, can Jahy's wallet bear such an expense? Because I feel like maybe a futon isn't breaking the bank per se, but, you know, Jahy's not exactly rolling around in money. And I guess, unfortunately, there's all sorts of varieties, you know, light futons, heavy futons, firm futons. You know, it's the same with mattresses, too. Like, some people prefer a squishy mattress, some people don't, you know, it really is down to preference, and I guess whether or not your back hurts after sleeping on it. Oh dear. You know it's a good mattress when you fall asleep instantly. So I guess the question is Jahy gonna go for that one? I mean, she's saying give me the best one you got, but, is that it then? You know, she bought it and everything? Like, there's gotta be a catch here. You know, like, she's gonna have to, like, go a week without eating or something to you know, balance this. Ooh, okay. So Jahy has been taken for an absolute fool. You know, it just looks nice, but it's still a futon. I wonder why the landlord would say a futon is a scam item. Or, I guess, better put, an item ripe for scamming. I mean, this futon seems to be perfectly competent if the landlord just falls asleep immediately. But yeah, I don't know what about a futon would make it easy to scam people. At least no more than it is easy to scam people with anything. I mean, this futon certainly seems to be superlative at its task if people just fall asleep instantly. Now, unfortunately, Jahy and the landlord are in a compromising position, and I feel like if the boss had her wits about her, she would take, like, a photo or something for blackmail later. Just to teach them all a lesson. Ooh. So unfortunately for Jahy, it seems like her water's getting shut off. Not for lack of payment or anything, but just because there's construction going on. And that's rather unfortunate, you know. Like, that is something I'm probably taking for granted, having running water and clean water and all that. It is very nice and convenient, and I can only imagine having the plumbing shut off would be rather disruptive to my daily life. So it's interesting that this isn't the first time Jahy's lived with the boss. It was back when she first arrived, when she last did it. So I get the feeling that this little sequence is seeking to draw a little distinction between how Jahy was then and how she is now. You know, she seemingly decided to live alone because she was unwilling to share a space with humans. You know, being number 2 in the Dark Realm and all that, but, yeah, she really has mellowed out to a considerable degree, because I feel like normally she would never consider doing something like this. Oh dear. I guess to really demonstrate how much Jahy has mellowed out, she's being given hand-me-down clothes. You know, like really girly, cutesy stuff. And if it were anyone other than the boss, I would suspect this as being some bizarre form of humiliation ritual. Just to, teach Jahy a lesson for her impudence. Man, there's something about the just utterly bamboozled, dead-eyed look on her face that sells the whole thing. Like, I don't really like this, but I don't think I can afford not to go along with it. Oh, that's interesting. The idea that Jahy has not merely grown emotionally but also physically, even in her diminutive form. That's, interesting, I suppose, and the implication that the boss was waiting for just such an instant to share the clothing is also kind of interesting. And I guess what's perhaps the most interesting is that Jahy's threats of imminent magical violence are just being shrugged off like, yeah, I know you would never do anything like that. Which, at this point in time, is probably true. Jahy has been thoroughly tamed, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. Like at this point, she has made a fair few friends among the humans, in both her capacity as an employee and just, a citizen walking around town. And I guess to be fair, it's never like she was reviled in public anyways, So I'm wondering what the fallout of this is going to be with, the boss saying like, hey Jahy, you can live with us for as long as you want, and stuff like that. Because, ultimately, this is sort of like a second home for her. And she certainly doesn't mind the people, I guess. To a degree. Deeply unfortunate, I guess, that the boss seems to thrash around in her sleep. Oh, boy. I guess this is the other shoe dropping, because, there's no way you're gonna get a good night's sleep like this. So I do find it interesting that the credits were so early in the episode, and I guess that's because we're now following around Sarva doing something silly and unrelated. I guess she's sort of come to the conclusion that Jahy's been forming alliances and making allies to better defend against her schemes, but I mean, that's not really the case, you know? She's just sort of living in the human world and making friends. So I feel like Sarva's kind of on the right path in that directly targeting Jahy has a tendency not to work, but kidnapping someone, you know, I feel like that's a good way to earn everyone's ire, like even normal people, because if you take, say, the boss hostage, you know, the landlord's gonna go on the warpath, which, frankly, Sarva would probably deserve at this point. Whoa, okay. So she's talking about executing hostages in front of Jahy, and I feel like, man, that's not a good idea. And now she's saying, like, ooh, maybe I'll take a human underling while eyeing up, like, a child that's obviously lost. I feel like, on the one hand, Sarva seems to be accidentally doing good deeds, you know, picking up litter, helping a lost child. But on the other hand, I do kind of hope the police show up and just arrest Sarva and throw her in a cell. That'd be kind of funny. Although, if Sarva recognizes how evil Jahy is and how unwilling she, or rather how undeserving she is of being number 2 in the Dark Realm, then perhaps maybe the best thing she could do is do good things, you know? Like, as we all know, like, good wins in the end. Like, good always defeats evil. So, why not lean into that, you know? Rather than fooling around with booby traps or engaging in replacing functional body parts with cybernetics, you know, maybe just focus on being a good person. I mean, if Sarva's so dead set on making a trap for Jahy, then make a trap that takes advantage of her seemingly evil nature, you know? Like, I don't know, like, a trap is still sort of like an evil kind of thing to do. It's certainly not sporting, but, you know, if you do have to set up a booby trap for someone, at least sort of exploit their evil nature rather than, I guess, the usual sort of thing where you try to exploit good tendencies, you know, like a willingness to help others. Oh. Okay, this is interesting. I suppose I was kind of right. It seems like that light being is sort of taking notice of Sarva and deputizing her. I mean, this creature of light is sort of gilding the lily a little bit. You know, I've seen your good deeds and how much you detest evil, so I will grant you power. Like, okay, I feel like Sarva was only doing good deeds incidentally, but nonetheless, Sarva has been empowered, and I feel like this is going to cause trouble for Jahy. Okay, this is interesting, because Sarva is of the Dark Realm. If she's now tasked with eradicating mana crystals, then I don't know how to square that circle. Well, that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.